Yeah, maybe a keeper. He's not big, but he's cute as a button right now. Get in here, yeah.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. I want to give you a few tips today about drop shotting for largemouth. We always think of drop shot and smallmouth, but many of the pros always have a drop shot tied on year round, everywhere we go. And specifically for me, living down here on Toledo Bend near Sam Rayburn, drop shot is always tied on in my boat year round. It's a great way to get bites. It actually catches big fish as well. A lot of people think it only catches small ones. So just tell you a little bit about when we're using it. My favorite time to use it probably actually is in the fall for numbers. A lot of fish are group up deep and you can catch a whole bunch of numbers. They seem to bite that drop shot a little bit better than they will like a traditional Carolina rig or a football jig. So, and some of that depends on what you're shooting for. Like for me, I do a lot of guide trips, so I have a lot of folks in the boat who are inexperienced, and a drop shot is a great way to introduce new people to the sport. People that don't fish every day or every weekend like a lot of us do. Drop shot's a great way to take someone and let them have some fish catches, whether it's, you know, your wife or you know, if you have a young child or a teenager just starting out. Drop shot's a cool way to get like some great confidence built up and get a lot of bites. But we also utilize it a lot in tournaments as well. So the favorite time I'm throwing this in tournaments is usually like that late fall, that August, September, like where we're getting like late summer, around brush piles. And you think, how am I gonna throw a drop shot around brush piles? Well, I actually utilize a Texas rig hook, and there's several different ones I use. This one has a nice little keeper on it. This little worm here is a V&M pork pin in 6-inch. It's red bug. That's one of our favorite colors here at Toledo Bend and Rayburn. Generally we're throwing that around brush after I have like threw a football jig in, or like a 10-inch worm, like fishing for those big fish in brush piles and those late summer tournaments. You pick up the drop shot. It's like kind of my mop-up bait. It's kind of like, I know there's one there. How can I catch him? And a drop shot a lot of times do that. One big tip I'll give you there is try to make sure, you know, especially like those of you who have forward-facing sonar now, we can make very specific casts to our brush piles. Try to fish the outer edges around the piles, because generally we're trying to pick off the fish that are kind of near the pile but not in the pile with a drop shot. So I try to pick off the edge fish first around the edge, and sometimes I'll do a circle around the brush pile before I throw directly in there. Because even though I'm using a Texas rig hook to help with hang-ups, you're still going to get hung up around these big gnarly brush piles sometimes. So that's one thing I always do, is try to throw it on the edges before I get in there. I throw it on light line. I know some guys like to throw like a bait caster with 12-pound line, that kind of deal. But for me, if I'm going to a drop shot, it's a finesse presentation. So generally I'm using, I have a 7-foot Falcon rod here. This is the Cara. It's a medium action with a fast tip. I use about 15-pound braid generally. This is high seas braid. It's got a very thin diameter, and then I tie to that either an 8 to 12-pound leader. And I just base that on how tough the bite is, how thick the brush is. Generally for me, 10-pound fluorocarbon leader is a good one to go with. With utilizing that lighter line, I'm trying to just get a few more bites. And a lot of times around brush piles, you catch great big fish on this. Even though the drop shot has that name, you're fishing a very tough time of the year in late summer and around brush. If you can just get them to bite, it's not necessarily a numbers game that time of the year when I pick the drop shot up. I'm just trying to make what lives in that domain bite. And we're targeting that domain because generally that's where the larger fish are that time of the year. So if you can just get a few of those to bite, and a lot of times a drop shot is going to be a way to do it. It's also great that time of year too. Fish are starting to group up some. So like for the Open at Sam Rayburn last year, I had the 1-2 combination. I was catching my bigger fish on a football jig out of brush piles. But if I went to several brush piles in a row and you start getting that spinning idea in your mind, like I ain't had a bite in a while, what am I doing? I could stop on a point that had some fish. I could graph around my Lowrance, find a few fish, and I could pick this up and catch a few of those limit fish, like the 2-pounders, the ones that get the live well going, but also like calm your nerves, settle you down, and then you can settle in and throw your jig around the brush piles if that's what you're throwing. But the other worm I throw, it's real common color, is Morning Dawn. I throw it in the V&M straight shooter. This worm, I just like it. It's a very small worm. It's like, I think 4.5 inches long. And this is the one I'm throwing a lot of times, like on the little schools, when I'm just trying to fill my limit and get some fish. We'll throw it around a brush pile a little bit as well. It's a little bit softer worm. It's a hand pour worm. You can see it's got tons and tons of salt on it. So a lot of times I stick to the pork pin in the brush piles, and I use this outside the brush piles. And the reason being is the pork pin isn't a hand pour worm. It's a little bit more durable and tougher, so your hook stays in it better. So as you're working through that brush, it tends to stay on there. But give these chips a try. Don't discount the drop shot for largemouth all over the country. It's a great way to catch some fish.